So how you doing, guys? Welcome to Dev Diary episode 18 for the 23rd of August 2018. So let's jump right into it and go over some of the changes we've been up to in the last week or so. So Alt-P, nice shortcut, play in this current window. So we added the ability for the player to change time. This will come in handy if they're carrying out a mission at night and they prefer to see things a bit brighter, if they're kind of questing and adventuring around the place and exploring. Also, some missions will only be available at certain times a day. Other things, like a player may have to wait a couple of days to come back and collect a reward or to carry out a task. So in that way, it's good that the player can change time. With that said, let's jump in. And we're in around 9 o'clock now, so we're going to jump to midnight. So there we go. We can't put any inputs, we can look around, but we can't fire or anything. And now we're around midnight. So as you can see, it's pretty dark. I'm going to run up here into the trees, just so you guys can see some shadows and some highlights and things like that. It's a bit more interesting to speed things up when there's a lot more shadow around. So okay, this is a good enough spot. We'll go for midday, 12 o'clock, noon. So yeah, you can see our shadows, and boom, we're here. So yeah, I'm happy enough with the effect. As some of you may notice, we only have dawn, midday, dusk, and midnight. Of course, there's nothing stopping us putting in the ability to travel to other, or to speed up to other points in the day. But for now, as proof of concept and kind of get things started, we know it's working. So coming back out of that, another thing I touched on maybe in the previous episode was that we had a vision mode. Now, vision mode is hooked up and working in the build. So as you can see, we can't fire, time slows down, we get a lens effect, and that's all good. But where it actually comes into play is up here. So if I come over to the stone, and we see that this little particle system around the standing stone. It's only visible when we're in the visioning mode, which is kind of cool, and that will kind of give you an idea of how we're going to use this in the future. Could also be used to kind of tell you to come back at certain times of day, or to use a certain element in a certain area, or in general just in driving the story forward and as a kind of a narrative mechanic. So that's kind of cool. Kind of highlights over here to the stone, telling us we should really check this out. Come over, check it out, hit E, and we're good. You may notice I don't have any enemies spawning in. I've taken away a lot of the stuff that I had for the demo for Dublin Comic Con, and we're getting back to kind of a regular development cycle here now. So they're the two major changes that are in the game so far. I probably will do a little video on for other UE4 developers on how I achieved the change in time of day. But for now, let's chat about what we're going to plan on doing in the near future. I'd like to rework the combat system. At the moment, it was just kind of implemented hastily in order to have something ready for Dublin Comic Con. The plan going forward is to develop the AI alongside the combat system and try and balance the two together to create something that's fun and that has a flow to it. Another change that I'm working on is we have this menu here, which is bound to the select button on my Xbox control pad. The idea being is this is only really the first page in this menu, unlike if I come out of that and if I go to my if I go to my pause menu, So you may notice in our pause menu we have different sections. It'll be something quite similar in this menu over here. At the moment, the only one that I was working on was time, but I intend to add an inventory system and maybe a location map and a few other details to that menu. But for starting off, I think a quest system and a inventory system would probably be a good thing to get in there. Controller support is also one of the top priorities, if not the top priority at the moment. If at all possible, I'd also like to get controller support for generic control pad, Xbox control pad and PlayStation control pad. It'd be nice to get that implemented this early on in the project, so it's not something that seems like an afterthought later. It's also something that's going to have to be done around the same time as redoing the combat system and the AI, because the controls for it are kind of paramount to the flow of the combat system and to how the feel of the combat system ultimately is. If we're not balancing the game and thinking of the controls at the same time and the player experience, then ultimately we could end up with a scenario where our controls are just not very intuitive. And all in all, in order for our combat system to be successful, we need to have a very intuitive and easy to use control schema. So guys, a bit of a short dev diary this time. I've decided to separate the more technical stuff out from the kind of just show and tell stuff. I will be doing a video on the time of day system and the ultra dynamic sky and how I worked with that. But for now, that's been Dev Diary episode 18. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll chat to you all again.